It is a great honor for me to kick off the panel of the Today meeting and set up the stage of discussion on frontier technologies in the biotech, life science, and food sectors, topics that impact all of us daily. As the EIB Vice President of the European Investment Bank, as somebody who eats even here in Luxembourg, coming from Cyprus, I'm delighted to share with you some insights and perspectives on the current challenges and opportunities we face in these critical industries and introduce the discussion. Europe has long been a leader in biotechnology, life science, and the food industry, boosting a strong technological and production base, and we have a lot to be proud of. However, with the current geopolitical context becoming more complicated by the day, it is obvious that we are facing increasing competition from other global players, particularly the United States and China. To secure Europe's leadership in life science, biotech, and food innovation, we must mobilize both public and private investment, especially for late-stage scale-up activities that require substantial capital. The financing gap remains a major challenge, preventing Europe biotech firms, agri-tech innovators, and food tech pioneers from expanding and competing on a global scale. Bridging this gap is essential for turning Europe's research excellence into commercially viable, world-leading businesses. At the same time, we must ensure that regulation facilitates rather than hinders innovation. In life science and food biotech, regulatory complexity often delays breakthroughs and reaching the market. Streamlining approval processes without compromising safety and sustainability will be key to accelerating Europe's ability to bring cutting-edge solutions in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and sustainable food production to consumers and patients. Another critical pillar is talent. These sectors are rapidly evolving, driven by breakthroughs in advanced food technologies, biotechnology, and sustainable agriculture, among others. Investing in specialized education and workforce upskilling will ensure Europe remains in the forefront of innovation, equipping researchers and industry professionals with the skills needed to drive the next wave of biotech and food tech advancements. At the European Investment Bank Group, we are committed to supporting these efforts. We recognize the importance of fostering robust financial ecosystem that can support the growth and development of these industries. This includes providing funding for research and development, supporting startups and growth companies, and facilitating public companies and public-private partnerships that can drive innovation and resilience across the full supply chain. With our AAA credit rating, we are ideally positioned to offer competitive financing, passing the cost advantages to clients through attractive loan conditions. At the EIB Group, we back project benefits from both financial and technical due diligence, lowering investment risk and catalyzing additional funding for private and institutional investors. The European Investment Fund plays a key role in strengthening Europe's life science and healthcare ecosystem. Since its inception, the EIF has committed over 5 billion euros to European technology transfer, venture and growth capital funds, supporting more than 1,000 life science companies. Its strategic priorities include supporting new and emerging life science teams across the EU, accelerating the translation of research into commercial solutions, expanding investments in underserved sectors such as advanced biomanufacturing, agri-tech, and food innovations, strengthening the position of established life science investors in Europe. We're actively shaping Europe's innovation landscape and remain fully committed to strengthen the ecosystem. In conclusion, while the challenges we face in the biotech, life science, and food sectors are significant, they present equally great opportunities. By working together, we can build a more competitive, innovative, and sustainable European ecosystem that can support talent, drives investments, and ensures long-term global leadership. The European Investment Bank Group is committed to play a role in this endeavor, and we look forward to collaborating with the industry, investors, and policymakers to build a high and brighter future for Europe. I do look forward to hearing the views of our distinguished speakers here today. Thank you, and I wish you all a productive and engaging discussions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Kyriacos. And now I'm delighted to welcome to the stage the European Commissioner for Startups, Research and Innovation, Ekaterina Zaharieva.
Vice President Kakouris, distinguished guest, it is an honor to introduce this panel that will discuss the present and the future of key strategic sectors such as food, biotech, and life sciences. These industries are not only crucial for our well-being, but also represent one of the most dynamic frontiers of innovation and economic growth. At the heart of this transformation is Europe's thriving startup ecosystem, which for the first time has been added to my portfolio responsibilities together with research and innovation. Over the past decade, the number of European startups has increased, with venture capital investment exceeding 90 billion euros in 2023. Europe is now home to over 400 unicorns, with more than 50 new ones emerging just last year. Over the past 7 years, we have also transformed the European Innovation Council into Europe's largest deep tech investor, supporting several of the European startups that have emerged since then, half of them actually in life sciences. In fact, life sciences startups are among the most promising, with biotech and medtech companies attracting over 15 billion euros in funding in 2023. These figures underscore the importance of life sciences as a high-impact, high-growth sector. We can be proud of the European strengths that have led to these achievements. First is our talent, our biggest strength, I believe. Our academic excellence is undisputed. Despite representing just 5% of the global population, Europe is home to 42% of the world's top 100 life science universities. This intellectual capital provides a strong foundation for breakthrough research and innovation. Second, we boost world-leading innovation hubs such as Medicon Valley in Denmark and Sweden, home to over 1,100 companies employing more than 70,000 people, and the Bio Valley region spanning France, Germany, and Switzerland. These hubs are driving next-generation advancements in biotech and pharma. And our pan-European strategic initiatives act as catalyzers. In partnership with the EIB, the European Commission is closing financial gaps, for example, through the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund and the ESC Fund. But let's be frank. Europe faces fierce competition, particularly from China and the United States, which are rapidly expanding their technology investments and capabilities. There are areas where we must improve to maintain our leadership, and for this reason, I will launch a startup and scale-up strategy in June. I'll mention a couple of the problems. They are well known, but first, European companies do not easily scale up in Europe, as the Vice President said. We must address persistent funding gaps in scaling high-risk tech companies. And I can inform you that we are working very intensively with EIB and hopefully to introduce the scale-up fund really very fast, with the private sector, of course. Second, Europe is excellent in research, but faces challenges in commercializing this discovery. Actually, we are home of the largest and a well-known program in the world for research and innovation, actually, Horizon Europe. And we are excellent in research and innovation. But we are really very slow, unfortunately, in commercializing this excellent discovery. And third is our fragmentation. I think is actually, to be frank, our biggest problem in scaling up and deployment on the market. We are saying that we are a single market, but actually, in fact, we are not. We have regulatory barriers. I spoke before we start this panel with excellent panelists that you are going to listen after me. And this is really the biggest challenge. And I can assure you that the Commission is really very focused on delivering this simplification. So we are working very intensively to introduce at the end of the year or in the beginning of the next, the 28 regime and the European Innovation Act, aimed at streamlining regulations, reducing bureaucratic delays, and creating a more predictable pathway to the market entry. Going back to the life sciences, by this summer, I am committed to shape a forward-looking life science strategy that ensures Europe remains at the front of this vital sector. We will be launching the consultation soon, and I really invite you to respond to it with your ideas. And actually, by the way, now we are under public consultation for the startup and scale-up strategy. So those of you who have interest to respond to the question, please do it. So I wish you a productive discussion. I'm sure that there will be excellent ideas will come up from this panel. And I can assure you that we listen to your problems, and Commission is very determined to deliver on the problems that are well known, to fill the gap of financial gap, but most importantly on simplification and make the lives of researchers, innovators, and business easier. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Well, now it's a great pleasure for me to invite my panel onto the stage. So please welcome Clara, Sattler, Sousa and Brito, who is Head of Europe Region for Philips, Mads Krogsgaard Thomsen, Chief Executive Officer for Novo, Nordisk, Fonden, Marta Ortega-Valle, who is Co-Founder and Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer at GreenLight Biosciences, Mary McCarthy from Sofinnova, where she's a partner, and Eric de Montgolfier, who is CEO of Invest Europe. So welcome to you all. Lovely to have you on stage with me. Now, just off the back of what the Commissioner was just saying, if I could see the audience, so could the lights go down a tiny bit? Could the lights go down a little tiny little bit, just so that I can see the audience? Our wonderful technical crew? Just a little bit, please? Anyway, thank you. Hands up if you know, or you can shout out to me, some of the 400 unicorns Europe has. Tell me one.
I can tell you 30.
Great. Okay, good. Because I would say, and the show of hands tells me, we don't know them. If we knew the unicorns in America, everybody could say who they are. We don't know those 400. And you are people who really might know. Anyway, let's move on to our panel discussion. Okay, so we're going to start setting the scene here with a little bit about all of you. And I'm going to start actually with Clara. A little bit about your company, Philips. It's not really known for life sciences or food. So tell us a bit about the work that you do and how it is here in Europe.
Yeah, thank you so much. Evidently, I hope we would be known for our medtech play and our impact on the healthcare sector. And it's very funny for me here on the panel because I feel very old because I'm standing here for a long-standing industry player. So some of our challenges will actually be more classical. Philips is an EU-headquartered, very innovative and sustainable health technology company. And we hope that we can actually have an impact in addressing the European health systems challenges by the innovation that we bring to the market. We invest nearly 10% of our revenue in research and development and do so at a higher share than most of our peers. We are one of the top 5 patent applicants in medtech, and I hold a background in that area, so it's always a particular pleasure to me. And we are also a leader in AI patent applications in healthcare. So, and as I already said, also sustainability for us is a major topic. So we invest about 263 million euros specifically in sustainable innovation in the last year. So we are looking at projects in the area of circular innovation to enable reuse. The company is based in the Eindhoven area with our research center, so not too far from here, so I had to travel, but not very far. For over 130 years, we are part of a local ecosystem, the Brainport ecosystem, with the high-tech campus in Eindhoven, which is the smartest square kilometer in the Netherlands, with more than 160 companies and institutes, some 11,000 researchers, developers and entrepreneurs. And we do share knowledge and research facilities, test labs with other campus companies. We work in a very collaborative manner across Europe, so I think that's why I would love to say that we're proudly European. We work with SMEs in our value chain. We work with the big university and research institutes and hospitals. Long-standing partners, if it would, for example, include the Charité, so I just came in from Berlin, the University Medical Center in Utrecht, or the Hospice de Lyon. We work very closely with a vibrant startup ecosystem, both through financing ourselves, as well as through coaching. We are very actively encouraging startups to drive within our Eindhoven ecosystem. We create spin-offs and inward investment in health tech. And so we are actually on that side of things, hopefully helping to carry through innovation. I think we will see as we move through the panel that evidently we are also facing our challenges in that environment. So we should largely be able to provide our own funding. We will see that I think some of those challenges are still very shared to some of the other co-panelists here.
Well, Clara, I was listening to all of that and I was seeing you smile your way through it as if everything is perfect, but we're here to dig into what's not perfect. So what are the challenges?
Well, I think for me, evidently, we are innovating, we are European, right? So it is very natural for us to drive innovation here in Europe. And then still, sometimes I find myself questioning whether I want to do that or I want to go somewhere else. So evidently, I will use the example of the EU regulatory landscape that also for us is very challenging. I will use the medical device regulation as that's the one closest to my heart. With that piece of legislation, the average certification time has approximately doubled to 12 to 24 months for a medtech device. In the US, it takes me 6 months to get the same device through. Certification costs have increased 260% since 2021. The medical device regulation does not fully enable sustainable medical devices. It leaves to countries, talking about the single market, to handle reprocessing, with some countries completely banning it. And that clearly, for us, for example, is one of the challenges where I find myself now questioning about where do I go to market first. And while there was a clear answer that Europe was the place to go to market first because it was the fastest, it was least bureaucratic, now the answer is the US. And we would go first in the US. And that is something that pains me to see.
Thank you, Clara. I'm going to just go through the panel and then we can interact a little bit more with your participation, I hope. So, Mads, I would love you to talk to us a little bit about, you have a long time working in the field of trying to accelerate and boost innovation. What is the best way to do that?
Well, first I worked more than 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry, heading up R&D, and realized that the ecosystem was really functional. European Medicines Agency works, I would say the whole ecosystem up to market approval works. So coming 4 years ago to the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which grants out 1.5, 1.6 billion euros annually within human health and planetary health, there are so many other dysfunctional areas. And just to highlight a couple of the steps in the value chain that are dysfunctional, we contributed to the Danish National Life Science Strategy that was approved a few months ago. And if you go all the way from basic research through to regulatory approval, there are a number of reasons why European startups in more than 50% of the cases exit Europe, and I'll mention just a couple of them. First is the transition from basic research at universities into startup companies. There we realized way too little was happening in Denmark. We've created a Bioinnovation Institute with seasoned experts in the field of spinning out companies and creating business models and patent strategies. It has led to 120 new companies in Denmark over the last 5 years that probably would not have occurred. So the spin-out phase and the help you need to create a small company strategy is one element I think Europe needs, because we're all like Denmark in reality. The next one would be, as you need Series A, B, and C financing, we see several valleys of death. There's simply too little risk-willing capital in this continent. We need to attract all kinds of funders, like foundations, like sovereign funds, like venture cap funds, maybe from the US, who see the light in Europe, that we really need to come together, and the time to act is now if Europe wants a chance. We also then later on realized that as you want to scale up, there's the big issue that when I was doing medicines, I could, if I didn't have factories myself, I could phone a whole range of contract manufacturing organizations. They would do the product for me the day after. That does not exist neither in deep tech, nor does it exist in biosolutions. So if you have a biopesticide or you have some fermentation product, there's nowhere to go. There are no CMOs. We need to fix that problem also in Europe, because otherwise the only place to go is the US or China, and that's not what we want as European citizens. And then ultimately, as you head for regulatory approval after the scale-up and proof of concept and whatnot, there's the major issue that we don't have a simple, we have a rigid, you mentioned medtech. In biosolutions, I know of several companies that we have co-created that have left Denmark and Europe to go to the US, because there you get approval of a biosolution product, whether it's fermentation or somehow bio-based, in 1 to 2 years. In Europe, it takes 6 to 7 years, and these biodegradable products, they are treated as hazardous chemistry, according to guidelines that are still back from the 1990s. So I think there's a lot to do, and the best thing that has happened with Mr. Trump and China and Putin is that we all realize that now is the time to act, and as a foundation, we are more than willing to work with EIB and the European various organizations, Horizon, etc., etc.
Do you think there need to be more scientists as regulators?
That what, sorry?
More scientists as regulators.
Well, I think you need the system for regulating, and it has to be more science-based and less, you can say, safety first is a good principle, but we are over-precautionary, and it's not a natural flow, for instance, in the field of biosolutions. I don't think we necessarily lack so much scientific talent in Europe, because I think we're going to see a flow from west across the Atlantic to Europe, and we should leverage that opportunity, actually.
Well, speaking of scientific talent that flowed across the Atlantic, but is coming back to us, Marta, you're based in Boston, you have MIT roots there, but you are refinding ground in Seville and other places as well. I just wanted to go back to something the Commissioner said, actually. She was talking about our academic excellence in universities here. You also mentioned to me it's not for lack of talent that there are issues here. But I don't know if anybody happens to know, she also mentioned the largest R&D program, the Horizon project. How many unicorns came out of that? Does anybody happen to know that? You can shout out an answer. Okay, right. So then, Marta, tell us about your experience, because I think you have seen both sides.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So GreenLight Biosciences is a company that is born in the United States. It was born 10 years ago. And we created a platform, a biocontrol platform that industrialized nature. We used the biotechnology to use a natural mode of action that can control pests in the field in a very selective, in a very effective, and without toxic residue. So that's truly a breakthrough in the way in which we have thought about helping farmers control pests and protect yield and productivity. And it's the result of the advances in the field, right? We are starting to see that we are getting very sophisticated in designing and controlling and scaling up nature. So GreenLight in the United States found a home where we were nurtured with a lot of money. We were able to establish our R&D facility in RTP. We have our manufacturing in Rochester, New York. And we were able to get our products approved in 24 months. And then we went to Brazil, and we were able to get our products approved in 12 months, right? So 2 years ago, my team came to me and said, Marta, we need to put a research station in Seville. And I thought, oh my God, no one is going to believe that it was not my idea. Because I think Seville is a wonderful place to be and do stuff, right? So you would ask, why Seville? Well, first of all, because Europe, I think, is a leader in food. And agriculture is at the core of our culture and our economy. So Europe is agriculture and high-quality food systems and other things, but absolutely it is known for that. And then also because as the Romans found out and later on the Arabs found out, the Guadalquivir is a unique fertile ground with excellent weather, and you can do a lot of field trial development. For agriculture, field trials are like clinical trials. Plants are our patients, and we have to cure them. And we want to do as many phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3s as we can in a year. And that geographical area is the place where larger companies are also based for developing their products. So that was the inception of why we came back here. However, I have to say that we are new to the family of the EIB with a facility that we signed last year. And through the process of engaging with Europe, we realized that there is a real opportunity. So hidden below the bad news of regulatory the good news, at least for the area where we are working on, is that we find the talent. We are an excellent employer for the new generations. Not everybody needs to go to Boston and to MIT, right? I mean, I'm happy for the opportunity I had, but I do believe that many times I would have liked to stay here and do the same, but I couldn't. It was not possible. But now it's enriched that we put forward that opportunity to our younger generation. And then, as we were engaging with the European Commission, we truly saw this desire of simplification. So when we talk about the window of opportunity that Europe has now, it's truly real that a lot of technologies and companies and great people in the US in the next 12 months are going to see their world shattered in ways that were unbelievable before, but are real now. And if Europe timely signals that truly we're going to do the homework to reduce that regulatory process and get closer to other geographies, and that we are really committed to help markets adopt the innovations, I think we can make it, and I'm sure the capital and the money will be there to bridge the companies from the moment in which they start to have revenue to the break-even, that late stage, larger tickets that we want in Europe. Because I want to share a final thought. In my opinion, an innovation is not an innovation if it has not reached the market and solved a problem that couldn't be solved before. Mm-hmm. So we cannot say we innovate because we do a lot of research if we cannot take it through the finish line to impact, because we don't change the world in the direction we want to change it.
So I want to use that word innovation, and also a word you used which just has sat with me since you mentioned it. You were nourished in the US. You were in this fabulous academic environment in a wonderful city, and it actually echoes something Clara was saying. You said you work in Eindhoven with great universities. I want to just ask, what is the benefit of having really strong R&D science parks, or that collaboration, that conversation between university, between the startup industry, and just a better education of learning from a young age? It was one word that came up when it came to actually pensions yesterday, but educating younger people to know how to shift ideas into innovation.
So I think that if I can add, I think we need some examples. We need to get some of the companies that are here and some other companies engaging that younger generation and showing it can be done.
That's...
Yeah, just to add to that, at least in our country, first of all, in primary school, kids are not having shiny eyes thinking about Mother Nature and biotechnology and green transition. The school system has not favored that. So one of the things we are realizing is that by stimulating some of those topics, natural sciences, etc., with examples, with the kits that they can use in the labs and so on, actually makes more of them want later on to go down that alley at universities. And that is actually an issue, because our population is aging and we need at least a significant proportion of the young ones. So I think getting them early on board with the fascination of natural and technical and of course also, you can say, other sciences.
Thank you, Mads. Well, Mary, I know that you are a scientist yourself. You've moved into the financial world now, and you see an awful lot of startups coming through. And for you, we were just chatting outside, if there's a regulation period of 7 years, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. But I think some of the solutions that the startups have to that problem, you've already heard that they end up going to the US for a shorter pathway. But that's only one of the problems, of course. So first of all, I agree with all the things being said. So I'm trying to, tie it into where I'm sitting in the ecosystem. As a VC investor, I'm investing in agriculture, food, chemicals, and materials in biotech, biosolutions. And it's different than investing in AI, for example, because we're making real products. So a lot of things come into play there. So on the one hand, yes, we innovate, but innovation is only successful when it is executed and scaled and brought to market. And for that, for example, for food, if you want to bring something to market, it is something on top of everything we've had here. It's also emotion. We eat it, we put it into our mouths. So if I'm hearing something, beer is brewed, cheese is, created from microorganisms, but if we try to make meat out of microorganisms, we're all getting, a feeling of, ooh, do I want to eat that? So there's a huge amount of emotion going on around food. So for all of the challenges we've talked about so far, this comes on top when you look at food, because we need to have a market demand. So the opportunity there, of course, is for startups to have food ingredients. So it's going in as an ingredient. We need more protein. We need to be able to create protein rather than just taking it from animals. And that's, I think, a very, very... it's a big gap from a European perspective. If we can decrease our reliance on, animal, whether it's for dairy or for, meat, we can really, really gain in sustainability, number one, but number two is our competitiveness, and that will also translate into European security if we are able to stand on our own feet rather than importing things from that perspective. To touch on education, it's something very, very close to my heart. My sister she works at UNESCO. She's all about STEM. Her whole life is about STEM. So it's exactly as you already said, we need to encourage our children to have an interest in science, because it's only then that in fact, the children can educate the parents about science as well. So it's super, super important. And STEM education, I'm saying it specifically, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths, but STEM education is about getting those faculties to work together. And that's the difference. It's not just doing a science subject, it's being able to go from the small of a test tube in a lab right up to a big scaling up. So there's a huge amount of engineering, and that gets me to my last point, which is about scaling, where if you were an innovator and I call it 0 to 1, you've got a new invention, great, but it needs to go from 1 to 1 million to make any difference or any impact at all. And that's where I see a big opportunity for partnerships with corporates, and that's not an easy road, because I've been a corporate, so I know what it's like from different perspectives. But we need to leverage the strengths of a startup, which is more on the innovation side, and the strengths of a corporate, because corporates know how to scale. And if we can incentivize that, then we really have something. And it more often than not goes wrong, which I have lots of scars from experiences there, but I still believe that's the way to go. From having been in a corporate and seen really 400 kiloton production plants running, and it's just mind-boggling how big that is, and to be able to have the competences to run that is very different than doing something in a fume cupboard. So
I think, Clara, you want to...
Yeah, I just would want to attach myself to that, right? The way I put it is very similar, actually. I always put it, the question is whether the big corporate gets to innovate faster or the startup gets to scale faster. And that's why, to your question, collaboration is so essential, because then you can help us to innovate faster on the startup side, and we can help you to scale faster, because that's what we know how to do, and that's what we have, which is reach. And that's why those ecosystems for us are so essential in making stuff actually happen in the real world. And evidently, for me, that is a very natural perspective. Since I'm running a business, actually, I have to make it happen in the real world. Otherwise, it's not worth all that much.
I just wanted to add on the STEM point. A lot of people now call it STEAM because they add the A for art and the creativity that is absolutely vital to science and technology as well. You did make me smile about needing more protein, because literally just this morning, as a small aside, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, and the presenters were joking about the proliferation of a little egg and spinach, and how they have certainly marked up the price of a little egg and spinach. So young people have certainly got the memo about the need for protein. So perhaps we need a conversation about what type of protein we need in the future. Eric, we haven't heard your voice yet, but it's a very important voice. Again, you have a long and very steamed history working and trying to figure out the problems. So talk to us about what goes well, what doesn't work.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for having me today. Private equity and venture capital play an irreplaceable role in shaping the future of biotech, food, and life sciences in Europe, and has done so for half a century already. And that role is only growing. These industries rely on innovation, and we contribute to funding it, from early breakthroughs in labs to scaling high-impact companies. That's how we ensure Europe stays competitive in some of the most critical sectors of our time. But right now, I must say, we have a challenge. There's a market failure in early-stage investment from our perspective. While there's now more capital available for companies at later stages, and I would like to congratulate Sofinnova for its latest fundraising, which has been announced on Monday, and for Novo Holdings' continuous support on these topics as well. There is an issue for early-stage companies, the ones working on the next big breakthroughs, because they're just struggling to secure funding. And it's a shame because European VC is actually the leader clearly in Europe versus US VC on that specific segment. So if we let this innovation gap grow, we risk affecting the European foundations in the industry. And worse, as was mentioned already several times, the best ideas might end up going elsewhere, taking talent, technology, and economic growth with them. Invest Europe is publishing the authoritative data on venture capital, private equity, and infrastructure fund managers. So I will share some of the trends with you so that you understand why I'm actually worried. Invest Europe's data confirm these declines in venture capital committed between 2021 and 2023 are occurring amongst almost all stakeholders. While the decline slowed a bit in 2023, the market has not yet fully stabilized. Banks, fund of funds, insurance companies, family offices, private individuals, and government agencies have seen actually their funding scaled back in the last couple of years. Corporate investors, endowments, and foundations remain a strong funding source, but with very high volatility, while pension funds have slightly increased their commitments over the last couple of years. So in essence, the COVID-19 biotech investment boom quickly faded, and now we need to reset and rebuild for the future.
Eric, I'd love you to tell us about how you view the collaboration that is possible between all the various money pots, the public, the private. What is the best form of collaboration, and how can it work quickly?
Well, public funding must complement, not compete with private capital to make financing agile, easy to navigate and efficient. The goal is really clear. We need to attract and retain capital at every stage of innovation, to echo what my co-panelists have said earlier. Collaboration between public institutions and private equity and venture capital firms therefore plays an important role in filling this gap. Public institutions provide policy frameworks, regulatory support, and early-stage funding when appropriate, while private venture capital is actually focusing on market discipline, scalability, and strategic expertise. But even there are some challenges at the moment. Government-backed venture capital has actually declined more than private venture capital since 2022. There are a number of reasons for that. Government agencies' decline indicates budget constraints, and government-backed funding is also under pressure. The current MMF under InvestEU is being used up faster than expected because the needs are there, and the EIF is working hard to deploy funds quickly. But life sciences was not a priority in the InvestEU program. And as you're aware, demand is growing and we need to think bigger. So as demand grows, we need to ask ourselves, how do we expand both models and how do we improve interactions between public institutions and private investors? And well, I think there are a number of possibilities that we should explore. One of them that's been mentioned also is that Europe must work effectively together to ensure the efficient allocations of investments across the EU. Right now, national investment regulations vary too much, making it complex and slow to deploy capital across borders. So the promising idea that I heard earlier via the Commissioner is actually the 28th regime as a means to solve this fragmentation. It's a framework that harmonizes rules across Europe and makes it easier for investors to back startups and scale-ups. So this really could create a more predictable environment for private investment. But again, we come back to simplification. It needs to be designed right. If it's simply added another level of complexity, it won't work. The focus must be on ambition, simplification, removing fragmentation across national markets, and last but not least, ensuring that capital flows quickly to the companies that need it most.
Mary.
I just want to comment on that because in my former life, I live in the Netherlands the last 25 years. You hear I'm not Dutch, I am Irish. that conclusion was also right. So what I saw there when I was a small investor is that on the one hand you've got national funding, but on the other hand then you've got province level. So I was in a fund where in fact I had to make the startup stay in my little postage stamp part of postage stamp, the Netherlands. Sorry to the Dutch, but the Dutch are super, but it's really, really small. And this is a big challenge because if you have a clause in your shareholders agreement that says you have to stay in Limburg, for example, this is a challenge if you're looking for an investor to come from outside. And if you say, okay, I'm going to, Ireland is going to invest in me, I'll move to Ireland, but you can't. And if you do, it's just, so it's like we talked about yesterday in terms of the single market, you also should have a single, from this perspective as well, that we shouldn't think, well, you're moving from one country to another in Europe, that's competition. We should think of ourselves as one Europe, and the competition is outside of Europe. And, I think that's a key point, because the startups have a lot of constraints when they're trying to find their capital. And if we all have constraints on the capital we can give them, then I'm lucky now. Sofinnova have much less constraints than when I was a small local investor. But it's just to illustrate the point of they start small and they have already constraints before we even meet them, and then we have to navigate that.
Well, that's really fascinating, because again, one of the top lines that has sat in my head since yesterday was Maria Louise Albuquerque, who said that Europe should have one Silicon Valley, not 27. And she said she doesn't care where it is. I mean, when we think about the US, of course, Marta, you know this all too well. We all know we can think of two hotspots of investment and brilliant research and that kind of seedbed of unicorn exploration. China, we can think again, most of us will know one or two. There are city spots and university spots. So where should that be?
So from the perspective of biotechnology applied to agriculture, I already mentioned that there is an area for research and development, but I have to say that when you bring products to farmers, you go everywhere, and you work everywhere, and you collaborate with universities in all places in Europe. So even if there is a concentration of a particular phase of development in a geography in Europe, the new frontiers for development in agriculture can uplift this type of high-quality programs in many places. So we shouldn't get nervous because there is a place that has a concentration of talent. In fact, you want that because you want people to move from company to company. For an example, just as an example, we have a very sophisticated operation in Seville, a large field trial development station that generally a startup takes a lot of time and money to build. So that facility that we use at 80% of its capacity has a 20% that we are going to have open for small biotech companies that are developing sustainable innovations for agriculture. So just by the fact that we are there and that we have this open innovation mindset, it makes sense that other companies reuse a research that is already built to advance faster. So there are positives to have certain concentration of activities, but that doesn't mean that then innovation for agriculture will only happen there. It will happen everywhere, because nowadays I have employees everywhere, and they are innovating with us. We don't need to be collocated. So
I know, Mads, you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add that I totally agree. I mean, it's not a secret that the Danish government, they want to create a so-called mini Kendall Square, like in Boston, called Innovation District Copenhagen. But when that is said, and is driven, of course, by the pharma sector, by the biosolution sector that exists in that region, but when that is said, I would fully agree that it should be all over Europe, because communication, we're in the same time zones, all can do Teams meetings. We are funding a regenerative medicine center where the three nodes, so to speak, are in Copenhagen, Leiden in the Netherlands, and Melbourne, Australia. And they're running 60 projects within regenerative medicine, and it's working extremely well, even despite the time zone differences. So I don't think we should be competing. Like when the EU wants to create 5 so-called AI gigafactories with all the software algorithms, etc., needed to be a world leader in any given specific discipline, whether it's pharma, whether it's biosolutions or whatever, deep tech. It doesn't really matter whether it's in Paris, Munich, whether it's Copenhagen or Stockholm, it will be accessible for everyone. So I don't think we should compete. The big issue is that we're still too fragmented. We're not working closely enough together, considering that we are just one small continent.
Well, that brings us back to what Eric was saying, which is that, and it's something that perhaps we don't discuss enough. We often have in all sorts of conferences the discussion about, Europe's risk averse when it comes to money, but we don't often have the conversation that we are internally competitive, even commune to commune. So that's another conversation that perhaps needs to be explored more. Eric, you want to add?
Yeah, it's true that when you look at the way innovation is financed across Europe, you see that French institutions are financing French venture capital firms. And we have the same issue replicated on literally every country. So I think that the important topic that we should also discuss today is access to capital, because the access to capital, to venture capital, is as scarce as venture capital has scarce resources to devote to typically life sciences. And it's really important to mention that there's something that should be done, I think, at European level to eliminate these frictions and this limited access to capital. We need to structure the financial ecosystem to support investment across all stages and all investors, not just when companies are ready to scale. It's too late, basically. So that means that adapting regulatory framework should happen for pension funds, for insurance companies, for banks, among others, to make long-term investment in innovation more attractive. Today, these institutional investors are disincentivized to invest in venture capital, which itself has less means than it should to support innovation. And that should go, because it's too important for us to let that stay too long. Secondly, we can also do targeted actions to make this happen. For smaller startups, public funding should step in to bridge the market failure. I indicated earlier that actually public institutions were investing less in proportion in the decline that other private venture capital. Normally, in I would say economic theory, public institutions should compensate at least partly what the public markets can provide in terms of funding. That did not happen. So this needs, I think, to be solved as well, while making sure that larger scaling companies find the appropriate financing. And it was very encouraging to hear the Commissioner telling us that with the EIB, they were thinking about a new program to support specifically life sciences and biotech.
I know that we're having a conversation which is steered for obvious reasons towards money and the need for raising the correct pipelines and pillars for everything to get to market, for the innovation to reach the people. Now, when a young person looks around and thinks, what will I work in? I want to bring it back to the topic, which is about food, life sciences, things that we need in our lives for our longevity, and we have an aging demographic here as well. MedTech, for example, as well. Why would a person in Europe, a young student in Europe, want to study in these realms, other than thinking, oh, I must go and study tech, I must do AI, I must go and become a financier? Why should they study these topics?
Well, when you talk to your kids, they all talk about we need to save the earth, the climate is going, array, etc. So the things that concern them in terms of biodiversity, climate mitigation, in terms of green transition of society, they are all driven by scientific disciplines, STEM plus a few others. So the sheer reason that they are more preoccupied by the globe, maybe even than their parents are, should drive them in that direction. And we should convince them that only with their contributions going forward will we actually solve the problems, because we need them in a demographic situation where we're getting to be too many old people and too many young ones, too few young ones to actually do the science. So we need to actually instill that in their minds early on.
Well, I won't go down the conversation topic of the green transition and the digitalization being completely divergent because of the need for water and various other things, but I will open it up to the floor. So if we could have the lights down and the lights up, I would love to ask for your questions from the floor. So I am beginning to see faces now. So have anybody here, have you any questions for our panel? I'm not going to have the excuse that the first panel after the first day is a quiet one. I know that you all have strong voices and thoughts and ideas, so any questions to our panel? Yes, I would love a question from you, and if you can introduce yourself as well. The gentleman who knows at least 30 unicorns in Europe.
And I'm PJ Parson from venture capital firm North Zone. And that's probably why I know 30, because we've backed quite a few of them, including Spotify. Anyway, a recurring theme here is the problem of fragmentation. And it seems like that's the sort of the endemic problem that we're not really getting to the heart of. I also see that even EIB has that challenge to deal with all the sort of the member states' respective needs. But do you see a path to actually eliminate that apart from the 28th member state or the administrative 28th state, which I think is a great idea and it will definitely improve things for startup ecosystem. But do you see what are the most important things to do to eliminate this fragmentation, which seems to be the core of the problem?
Well, at least one way, if you're a philanthropy is it not working? Okay, like the Novo Foundation, we historically have awarded grants to investigators, scientific investigators, let's say in Denmark or Sweden or so. Now that we're going pan-European, we will almost demand collaboration between universities. So just like we are funding research centers with nodes in different European countries, we will also have grants where you can have a principal investigator, but then you need co-PIs in other European countries, really forcing the best of academia to work closer together. Otherwise, they won't get a grant. So that's one way of doing it. Another is, of course, doing hotspot mapping of a given scientific discipline, and then having identified the hottest of those hotspots, then you actually offer them a collaboration where that has to be synergistic in some shape or form.
So I want to take your point and put the fragmentation in the context of the go-to-market and the fragmented or many steps regulatory process. And I think that that's a barrier that if the simplification gets to solve, at least for frontier technologies, we're going to see a number of technologies that are ready to be used, getting into the market, and then a lot of incentive for LPs to give money to venture groups to capture those opportunities. So we have a backlog of technologies that are ready to be used, waiting at the door of the regulatory. And that process, which is fragmented today, requires extra attention, because we see that other sophisticated regulators, they do it in a centralized manner and that they do it in less time. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We are not talking about not doing it responsibly, making sure that what we put in the field is safe. It can be done. It's just political willingness and really putting that as also as a security priority, because we want to be able to grow the food. We're going to need to have food sovereignty as well, right? So that's another thought about fragmentation that will incentivize the creation of a stronger market for investment.
Eric?
Just two comments on that one. One of the answers is stopping gold plating at member state level of European legislation when it's incorporated into a member state's law. That would help tremendously on a lot of different levels. That's one. The second is tax incentives, but I won't go that route too much, except to mention that grants are valuable tools, but they are slow, burdened by lengthy applications and bureaucratic hurdles. If you think at tax credits, on the other hand, it gives companies immediate, predictable financial relief, allowing startups to invest in R&D, in talent, and many other things. And I think that in terms of model, we should think more in terms of Europe as trying to push for actually tax credits, i.e. member states' decisions on that could be actually Europeanized versus grants, which I think have shown its limits.
Yeah, a quick comment. Fragmentation is also at the level of between academia. You can say, let's take plant-based foods, for instance. You have the farmers, those that create the new seeds for the crops. You have like the food industry. All of these, if we want, let's say, plant-based foods to take off, our impression has been that the way to get them together is you've been using open source innovation, where there's no patenting, it's an IP-free environment. Then after the given project has taken place, then everybody's free to take out patents, etc., etc. But this has really facilitated the various actors to become not fragmented, but to work together in one ecosystem. So I think that's something that also, even in pharmaceuticals, has turned out to work in a project that we've called Odin. I think we should try to do more of that, because many of these areas are pre-competitive rather than competitive per se.
Mm-hmm. Because adding to that, if a startup has to create their own value, their customer channels, that is huge work and it has huge costs. If they can leverage the corporate down the line, that you can use their channels, there's value to be shared there. And I think it's about value sharing at the end of the day across the whole chain of innovation.
I just want to bring it back to you. I think you still have the microphone. Yes, what is your solution?
If this works, yeah. I'm not sure if I have a solution other than that there are a couple of concepts that I think sort of are always in the way, and it's that you need to sort of please a certain local government, or you're trying to sort of shape the legislation to make something specific happen, because there's always an unintended consequence. And I'm not against regulation. I think a regulation is very important to sort of get larger markets to work together. But I think in general, I think we are missing the mark in many regulatory contexts, and it's not this subject specifically, but GDPR was a very interesting idea that I think was about protecting us to be basically leveraged by the big platform companies. And Europe went ahead and did that regulation. But what actually happened was that all the media companies that were putting all the sort of investments into creating the content, they were the ones that were hit, and the platform companies, the big American companies, they basically got a free pass from this regulatory thing. And I think the EU really should look a lot more into sort of the unintended consequences of what can happen. And most of those are, you know, just getting us more and more fragmented and weaker in this new environment.
Thank you. Other questions from the floor? We have great. Can we have quick questions, because I have maybe 5 minutes left. So quick questions, quick answers, and quick microphone movement.
Helmut von Glasenapp, European Long-Term Investors Association, the Association of National Promotional Banks and Institutions.
Not that quick.
So the public investors. Yesterday, Majut Falkstedt from the EIF said, if I would be put myself in the shoes of a startup, I would go to the US for the reason of valuation. And we hear that the European Commission is reflecting about changes in the Savings and Investment Union. And I would be interested to to learn from the panel. What do you think we could do in Europe to have better valuation, better exit possibilities for investors so that the companies are attracted to stay in Europe?
Thank you. I will take that question. I will also take the question right at the back, if the microphone could move right to the back. And I will allow our wonderful panel, who these latecomers have missed, a little bit of time to just summarize in about 3 minutes your main points. But I'm going to take this question at the back as well to combine it.
Thank you very much. My name is Kate Pelk. I'm a final PhD candidate at Aalborg University in Denmark. It was a very inspiring discussion, and it has actually inspired an idea to develop a multidisciplinary project proposal on educating young children in primary school on themes that all of you talked about: entrepreneurship, venture capital, investment, STEM, agri-food, etc. In my free time, I'm also supporting academics in developing beats for Horizon Europe, etc. So I am very interested in exploring with you panelists, with other people here, an opportunity of jointly developing this kind of project. I will be here available. If you would like to take it further, I'll be really happy to discuss it. Thank you.
I think that's a private conversation that can be taken into the break, but we wish you the very best of luck, and I think we all support those ideas. But we have the first question there as well, and in about three-ish minutes, would you like to just answer the question, but also summarize everything we've said in the last hour, because we now have literally doubled the population in the room.
Yeah, I think I would just repeat that I do believe that capital goes where it's easiest to have impact. At least that's how I look at how we deploy capital. So I would want to urge us again to consider simplification of respective even European legislation, not to talk about local legislation, to really make sure that we can get products to market fast enough in Europe to have the impact on our European, in my case, health systems, because that's what I speak from. I think the urge and the necessity is quite high. So I would love us to see how we can impact that, to look at healthcare not as a cost factor, but as a factor that where better health can promote actually economic growth, and to make sure that we see the investment that we make to also bring the economic return for Europe in that space.
Yeah, I would say that the value chain within life science is not stronger than the weakest link. And we've discussed many of those parts of the value chain, from the translation from basic research into actually spin out companies. We need systematic and concerted efforts to make that happen. There are ways to do that. From the valleys of death that relate to actually funding the growth of these towards Series A, B, and C, and so on, and the scaling up, technologically speaking, to a proof of concept stage and to the commercial stage, where we are definitely lacking European infrastructure and as I mentioned, also more risk-willing capital. So I think we need a concerted effort across Europe in all of these areas.
Well, I think that's a perfect line. We are not stronger than our weakest link, and we can put that across pretty much any conversation. Marta?
I'm in full agreement with what was just said, and I would like just to leave you with a thought. As a company that is in the United States and in Europe and wants to grow in Europe in the next years aggressively, I have to tell you that there is a window of opportunity, that the simplification can signal to other companies in the US that need certainty, and they will come because you have the market and you are aligned with the thought of climate, sustainability, food, and quality. So I encourage everyone to push the ideas that the President introduced in her opening remarks and truly make those regulatory systems simpler to push all those technologies that are already developed to the market. Because the solutions we need in the next 5 years, they have already been developed. We need to push them in the hands of the farmers and the customers in general.
Thank you. Mary.
If you ask me what I'd like to see us collaborating rather than being in competition with each other as European countries. So we need to have a shared need. We have a shared need, but we have to really identify this shared need. That's the first thing you've got to do for change management. So we need to manage the change that we need to make here, and we need to scale these technologies in a speedy way.
Thank you, Mary. And final short word, Eric.
I'll try. To answer Helmut's question, I think that savings and investment initiatives that we're talking about is great. I don't think that securitization will serve our industry, but it will certainly serve the banks and serve financing of the European economy. So I'm interested to see what will actually be done for public markets, for private markets, where today the main means of financing European SMEs. Now to your last question, Lisa, I think that biotech, food and life sciences should be a European priority for competitiveness and must be treated as such, as a long-term strategic investment and financed as well. Second thing, I think that regulatory frameworks must adapt to make long-term investment into biotech and life sciences more attractive. They are not to date. And lastly, I think that public funding must complement private capital in all its capacities, and there are numerous. We've mentioned a number of initiatives, and we welcome all of them.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our wonderful panel. Thank you, and good luck with all of the work ahead of you. Thank you. Well, welcome. Welcome to all of those of you who have joined us a touch later. I can see a little collection of people towards that door. As always, plenty of space this side of the room. Feel free to just walk over in this direction. You'll find plenty of chairs. Do come forward. We always like to see faces in the front rows, and I can see